Hey guys, Chris here. I want to do a video today talking about caffeine. I want to talk about matcha and I want to talk about cacao today. We can also talk about decaf and chocolate and Coca-Cola as well if we get a bit of time to talk into that. But the main thing is coming off caffeine. The main drink we focus on coming off is coffee, and coffee has the most milligrams of caffeine compared to many of the other hot beverages. And that's where you're going to notice the significant change. But as I found a problem in where I am now in terms of coming off caffeine completely, what I've decided to do is come off everything that has any caffeine in whatsoever. And this includes chocolate, includes Coca-Cola, and the drinks like matcha and cacao. And if you're into these kind of spiritual events and you drink cacao in a ceremonial setting, or matcha, or you drink it once a week mindfully, what I found is it's good to cut these out completely as well. I cut out cacao for a while, and then I brought it back in again as we're doing a matcha ceremony, in a tea ceremony, like Japanese kind of ceremony. But similar with the cacao, I found myself that I couldn't sleep. I felt really good, very present. And like with cacao, your heart opens and you feel, like really good for a sustained time. But the lack of sleep, the anxiety, all of these things are stimulants, they're drugs. They give you something, but they also take something away. And this is the most important point that I want to make. So when you come off stuff, like when I came off caffeine, and then I go and have a matcha, like maybe because I've not had caffeine for a month, then I have a bit of matcha and I'm doing it in a matcha ceremony. There is a part of me that, not that I feel guilty that I've had some caffeine, but it is still in my system. The next day I'm chasing the dopamine. I really want to have it again. And also it's easier to then get back onto the coffee and to, easier just to say, well, I had one yesterday, I'll have one today. So the good thing is just cutting it completely out. And I think with the spiritual kind of side, and people go, oh no, well it's not caffeine, it's this and that. Yeah, it's a very sacred, like cacao, very sacred medicine, and you can do it with, with an intention. But sometimes it is really just worth reflecting. Have you already taken what you've taken from this medicine? Cacao, I've had cacao so many times, I've done so many different ceremonies. If you're new to it, then it's good to explore. Matcha, I've done so many matcha ceremonies in Japan and just generally consuming matcha, and and green tea. And sometimes you have to say, I've probably taken everything away from this. Just like if you're doing weed or you're doing ayahuasca and you're doing a lot of hape and all these other things. I was speaking to one of my friends who was doing that. He was doing microdosing and he's getting the anxiety. So sometimes you have to arrive at, okay, maybe these kind of medicines and these stimulants have given us what we've needed. I've drank coffee for some 20 years of my life and now coming off it, and it has, I'm not saying it's not given me anything, and maybe I do go back to it, but in terms of staying off it, I feel so good. My nervous system is regulating and getting back to normal, and you can feel a bit flat, but you're looking for dopamine in the natural way. And that is the most important thing. And when you go on to decaf as well, what I found is, sometimes the decaf tea can still have 2 milligrams of caffeine, but it still has caffeine in. It's like the alcohol, like I've had sometimes these non-alcoholic beers I don't drink. You're having 0.5% alcohol or 1% alcohol, and it's still alcohol. It's still, you can still feel the effects. Sometimes I see it's like 0.05. And I don't know if that's a mind thing, but you can still feel it. The ones where it's like 0.0, okay, there's none at all in here. But again, it's like, why are we drinking the alcohol? Why are we drinking the non-alcoholic beer? Like, it's not necessarily good for you. You could just be better drinking water. And that's the big place to get to, is if you can be comfortable drinking. Every time I drink water, especially if it's like really good water, like I love it. It's like you want to be happy just drinking water instead of thinking, oh, I always need something with a taste. And Coke, a lot of us go to Coke. We don't know how much caffeine is in Coke. Well, we do know if you look into it, but many people don't know. And the other day I seen a kid drinking Coke and then he was going crazy. There is a lot of caffeine in Coke. chocolate as well. And you might be like, well, I like chocolate. And really ask yourself that question. Why do you like chocolate? When you eat the chocolate, yeah, there's lots of sugar, there's lots of there's caffeine in it as well. So I'm not really saying on this video, don't have any caffeine whatsoever, but I think it's good to try. And it's much easier than I thought it would be, because when I've cut out Coke and I've cut out caffeine, I've actually not really missed it. Like, I've maybe missed the taste of drinking a Coke or having chocolate. But you have an ice cream or something, you don't have to have chocolate ice cream. There's other options. You don't just have to have Coke. There are other, but you don't drink lemonade, because lemonade is not Coke. It's not addictive. I was writing a blog post, and it's like, if you can't drink Coke, are you going to go to McDonald's? Are you going to wash that Big Mac down with, a bottle of water or a lemonade? Maybe not. Maybe it's the Coke. All of these things, they come together. The chocolate, and all of these things, like, they all mix together. So that's where I'm standing. And obviously I know people could be saying, well, it's matcha and it's cacao and it's really sacred and all this stuff, and just really do the research as well with cacao. Like, I found out cacao is like, they do it in these tribes in the jungle, and they really take the time to pick their own cacao, and they dress up, and they make it a very big sacred ritual. It's not just something you would do every week when you sit down and you're doing some sort of ceremony. These things can be replaced just with meditation. Matcha is like, when you look into it as well, because I did sort of host a matcha ceremony, you say, oh, well, it's really good, it helps you be more present and be more mindful. And the best way of being more present, more mindful is, without any sort of stimulants, without any drugs. But I would still say, for ceremonies, for the tea ceremonies, for the matcha ceremonies, or cacao ceremony, yeah, I think if it's in a real setting, that can be okay. But the thing that I wanted to share is that I did find it's still affecting my sleep. It's given me a bit of anxiety later in the day or the next day, and it's also getting my dopamine releasing in my brain again. And you're back on this kind of caffeine, because it is still caffeine. And caffeine has found a way to get into all areas of our lives. When we sit and we drink tea together, when you're at work, when you wake up in the morning, when you're relaxing with your friends on the weekend in a coffee shop, and then when you're in these spiritual events as well. We say no alcohol, no drugs, but then people are having caffeine, and then there's other plant medicines as well. And these things are giving us great things that are maybe expanding our consciousness, and I think the matchas and the cacao can do that, as probably with coffee, is maybe changing our consciousness slightly, but it's getting to the point where you're like, okay, I've taken enough. Is it worth the anxiety? Because when you completely strip away all the caffeine from, saying the no to Coke, no to Coca-Cola, and chocolate, and all the decaf and all this stuff and the green tea, what is left is peace and good sleep. And yeah, when you meditate, you'll be very blissful. Yeah, you will be different to 95% of the population drinking caffeine, but in a way you kind of escape the matrix, and taking the red pill is the new red pill. And like, for me, on some 10-11 weeks now, with no caffeine, I can say, yeah, I've been definitely feeling those effects. So, but that's where I am in going back to the matcha and back to the cacao, maybe having a piece of chocolate. I've just noticed that effect again. So it's really good to try and just go at least a month, at least 2 months, 3 months, with no caffeine whatsoever. And then you can look to introduce things. But as you'll notice, when you have the decaf tea, when you have the matcha or the chocolate bar, you will just notice a change in you, and you might just not want it. If these things are that difficult, if you think, oh, I can quit them, no problem, then just go 3 months with nothing and try this challenge, and then, and see how you feel. Some people are not as sensitive to caffeine as others, so it's worth experimenting, especially if you want to remove anxiety and peace. And I also just wonder how people in the world would be if they didn't have any caffeine at all. Like, how maybe the anxiety would go, and all these other things. And it is linked to watching YouTube videos, social media, and all this sort of stuff as well, because it's the dopamine that's going in the brain. And once you get the dopamine from an external source, it's much easier to then get it from another external source. Whereas if you're like, okay, I have to get my own dopamine, I have to get up early, I have to see the sun, I have to go for a run, I have to get a cold shower, I have to work on the hardest task. This is where the great, this is how dopamine, you're facing the pain to release the dopamine, and it feels good. And that's how we want to go, rather than like, I'm just sitting here, I'm taking something externally pleasure without working for it. It's giving me dopamine more and more, and then this is what leads to procrastination and being lazy and all these other things. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you in the next one.